I hadn't seen the house since the day we buried my father. It rose from the snow like a frozen cathedral, every window lit, every memory waiting to ambush me. For 2 years, I'd stayed away, telling myself distance would make grief gentler. It didn't. It only gave the ghosts more room to breathe. When the taxi stopped at the gate, I sat there for a minute, watching my breath fog the glass. The light above the door flickered once. A bad omen, maybe, or a warning. Daniel opened the door before I reached the porch. He looked exactly the same, impeccably dressed, eyes like cold water. "Daniel, Rachel," he said. "Didn't think you'd actually come back." I told Mom I would. He stepped aside, forcing a smile. "Then come in. It's still your home, at least tonight." The hallway smelled of cinnamon and furniture polish, but underneath it lingered something stale, like unopened rooms. The family photos lined the walls, as always, except the one of me at graduation. That frame was gone. In its place hung a landscape, empty fields under a winter sky. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Her hug lasted longer than it should have, like she was trying to remember what warmth felt like. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said. "I'm fine. Long flight." Behind her, Daniel poured wine into crystal glasses. "Let's eat before everything gets cold." The dining room glittered with silverware and candlelight. For a moment, it almost felt normal, until I realized the seat at the head of the table, my father's seat, was empty, yet untouched. A ghost was still presiding over dinner.
Mom carved the turkey with trembling hands. Daniel talked about the business, our father's company that he now ran alone. He spoke with the easy arrogance of someone who'd finally claimed the throne. I let him talk. The sound of his voice used to make me angry. Now it only made me tired. Then, just as Mom was about to bring dessert, Daniel lifted his glass. "There's something I'd like to discuss," he said. "It's better to do it while everyone's here." My stomach tightened. His tone was rehearsed. He slid a brown envelope across the table toward me. "The lawyer dropped this off last week, Dad's revised will." I frowned. Dad already finalized everything before he passed. Apparently, he made adjustments. You should read it. Mom's eyes dropped to her plate. The silence was deafening. I unfolded the papers. My name wasn't anywhere near the word inheritance. Everything, the house, the company shares, even Dad's watch collection, went to Daniel. I looked up slowly. "You forged this." He smiled faintly. "You always did underestimate me. Dad would never cut me out." "He did. You walked away when he needed you. You made your choice." I pushed back from the table. "You're lying." "Rachel," he said almost gently, "pack your bags. This house isn't yours anymore." The candles flickered as if the words themselves had sucked the air from the room. Mom whispered my name, but I barely heard her. Something inside me cracked. Not loud, just final. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every wall felt like it was leaning closer, listening. Through the vent, I heard Daniel's voice downstairs, calm and triumphant. "She'll leave quietly," he told Mom. "She always does." Always. He thought my silence meant surrender. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, counting each second between the clock ticks, letting the humiliation burn into memory. By sunrise, the shame had turned to something else, an old, familiar steel that I hadn't felt since my father's funeral. If Daniel wanted a war, I'd give him one. But I wouldn't fight like him. I'd fight like Dad taught me. Quietly, with evidence. I wandered through the dark hallways like a thief. Every creak of the floorboard felt like the house trying to warn me. In Dad's old study, dust covered everything except the desk. The drawer was locked, but the key was exactly where he'd always kept it, taped under the lamp. Inside lay bills, ledgers, and a small black USB drive with a piece of masking tape on it. In my father's handwriting, "For Rachel, if you ever need the truth." My throat tightened. Back in my room, I plugged it into my laptop. A folder opened. Documents, voice notes, scans. The first recording began with the sound of coughing. "If you're hearing this, sweetheart, I couldn't fix it in time. Daniel's been pushing me to change things. Something feels wrong. Keep this safe. It's proof of what's real." I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. Dad had known. He'd seen it coming. The drive contained scanned wills. 2 versions, one signed 3 months before his death, split evenly between Daniel and me. Another dated weeks later, giving everything to Daniel. The signatures were identical. 2 identical. Dad hadn't changed anything. Someone else had. Morning light crept across the floor as I compared the files. The forged document carried digital fingerprints from another client's estate, a mistake only arrogance could make. Dad's real signature curved naturally. Daniel's copy wobbled at the pressure points. He'd stolen everything our father built and buried the evidence under his own name. I thought of Dad's last words to me. "Daniel is fire. You're light. Don't let him burn you." Maybe light wasn't enough anymore. I copied every file onto my laptop and hid the USB in my coat pocket. For the first time in years, I felt my pulse steady, not from fear, but focus. I left early, telling Mom I needed air. In town, the church bell rang 10 times as I pushed open the office door of Mr. Collins, Dad's lawyer for 30 years. He looked older, thinner, guilt etched around his mouth. "Rachel," he said, "I was wondering when you'd come." I set the USB on his desk. "You know what's on this." He sighed. "I warned your father not to trust your brother with the paperwork. After the stroke, Daniel insisted on helping. Then new forms appeared with my name already printed. I refused to sign, but another firm did. So he forged everything." "Everything," Colin said. "But it can be proven. The timestamps, the metadata, those don't lie." I exhaled slowly. "Then let's prove it." He hesitated. "Are you sure? This will destroy him." "That's the point." When I stepped outside, snow had begun to fall again. Each flake melted on my coat like a quiet applause from the universe. For the next week, I lived like a ghost inside that house. I smiled at breakfast, nodded through Daniel's shallow attempts at civility, and spent my nights gathering evidence. Old notebooks, emails, financial statements that didn't add up. Mom pretended not to notice the printer running after midnight. She finally confronted me one evening. "Rachel, what are you doing?" "Finding the truth." She looked weary. "Your brother isn't evil, he's lost. Lost people don't forge wills." Tears welled in her eyes. "If you destroy him, you'll destroy what's left of this family." I wanted to say, "He already did," but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I kissed her forehead. "I'm just finishing what Dad started." That night, I labeled a red folder, "Silent Night." Every sheet inside was another nail for Daniel's coffin. Christmas approached again. The calendar a cruel joke. Daniel busied himself planning parties, pretending everything was normal. He didn't notice how calm I'd become. Guilt expects fury. It doesn't know what to do with silence. On Christmas Eve, I stood outside beneath the same lights that had welcomed me weeks earlier. The snow whispered around my boots, the house glowing like a stage before the curtain rises. Inside, I could hear Daniel's laughter.
For a moment, I almost felt the ache of nostalgia. Then I remembered his words, "Pack your bags." So I did, but not the way he meant. I packed truth, proof, and patience. Tomorrow night would be his last Christmas as king of this house. Morning broke brittle and pale, the kind of cold that cracks skin. Daniel hummed downstairs while I poured coffee, his cheerfulness a thin disguise. He didn't ask what I was doing on my laptop every night, and I didn't volunteer. We were two actors waiting for opposite cues. By noon, I had compiled everything: scans, transcripts, even voice messages where he bragged to a friend about fixing Dad's mess. When I replayed them, his arrogance tasted metallic in my mouth. That evening, Mom asked softly, "You're planning something, aren't you?" I met her eyes. "I'm correcting something." She sighed. "You sound like your father." "Good. He deserves to live somewhere in this house again." I spent the next 3 days building what Collins called an irrefutable chain. Every lie Daniel told now had a paper shadow walking behind it. The idea came while I watched him pour wine for himself one night. He always bragged best with an audience. I just had to give him one. So I arranged a dinner, December 31st, a final family gathering before the new year. He laughed, thinking it was surrender. "Closure suits you. Maybe we can be civil after all." "I'd like that," I lied. I invited Mom, Mr. Collins, 2 family friends, and Daniel's lawyer. I cooked all day. It helped disguise the trembling in my hands. When the table was set, I hid my father's real will beneath my plate. At 8 o'clock, Daniel arrived wearing the cufflinks Dad gave him the year he stole his first deal. He kissed Mom's cheek, toasted to new beginnings, and settled into the seat he believed he'd earned. Dinner unfolded like theater. Small talk, false smiles, silver clinking like quiet threats. When the moment felt right, I stood. "There's something we never finished last Christmas. The truth."
Daniel chuckled. "Rachel, please, not tonight." But the room was already listening. I opened the red folder and laid out the documents. Dad's voice, transcribed in black ink, the time-stamped files, the analysis. "Dad never changed the will," I said. "You did." The lawyer leaned forward, frowning. "Daniel, these look fabricated," he interrupted quickly. "She's desperate." "Are they?" I slid a photo across the table. The signature overlay. 2 identical signatures, pixel-perfect copies. Real people don't sign exactly the same twice. His face blanched. I continued, calm and cruel. "You used Dad's stroke as a weapon. You rewrote his legacy to feed your ego." "Stop," Mom whispered, but I couldn't. Years of silence demanded sound. "I said this house wasn't mine. You were right. It's not mine anymore. It's a crime scene." Daniel slammed his fist on the table, rattling the glasses. "Enough." Mr. Collins rose quietly. "Daniel, the authorities have already been notified. They'll arrive soon." Daniel turned to me, stunned. "You called them?" "Yes," I said. "Before dessert." The clock struck 9 as blue lights bled through the curtains. He lunged across the table, but 2 officers entered before he reached me. Mom screamed. The guests froze. They restrained him while he shouted my name like a curse. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It makes me free." The officers led him outside through falling snow. The sound of the door closing was the cleanest silence I had ever heard. Mom collapsed into her chair, whispering, "What have we done?" "What was necessary," I said. I followed them to the porch. Daniel turned once, his eyes wild, voice cracking. "Dad would hate you for this." "Dad hated lies," I replied. The police car disappeared down the icy road. Behind me, the house exhaled, a long, tired breath, as though it had been waiting years to rest. The trial was quick. Forgery, fraud, coercion of a vulnerable elder. He pled guilty when the evidence became inescapable. I sat in the back of the courtroom while he stared at the floor. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, I said no, Your Honor. The truth has already spoken. Mom didn't attend the sentencing. She couldn't bear it. She moved to a smaller house near the coast, away from whispers and history. I visited her once before leaving town. She hugged me with quiet gratitude and guilt tangled together. You ended it, but will you ever rest? I will, I answered, though I wasn't sure what rest meant anymore. When the verdict came, 5 years reduced for cooperation, I felt nothing. Justice doesn't thrill, it drains.
3 months later, a letter arrived from the prison. Daniel's handwriting was uneven. His arrogance melted into shame. Rachel, you were right. I didn't steal the house for money. I stole it because I wanted Dad to look at me the way he looked at you. Now I see he never stopped looking at you. You win. You always did. I read it twice, then held it over the fireplace until it burned. The flames ate the paper slowly, curling the edges into black petals. When it was gone, I whispered, "You finally told the truth." After that, I sold my half of the estate and used the money to buy the company back from bankruptcy. I renamed it Reed Enterprises, Renewal Division. It wasn't sentiment, it was reclamation. Daniel had built an empire of lies. I would build one of control. Success came faster than guilt. Within a year, I had turned the company into a consulting firm for fraud prevention, a delicious irony that the world applauded but never understood. Interviews, awards, board seats. Every handshake felt like vengeance disguised as respect. Mom called sometimes, her voice soft with pride and sorrow. "I saw your name in the paper. Your father would be proud." I know, but pride wasn't what drove me anymore. It was memory, sharpened and weaponized. Sometimes, late at night, I'd picture Daniel in his cell, counting cracks in the ceiling, realizing that every wall around him was built by his own hands. I didn't hate him. Hate would have meant I still cared. I'd simply outlived him. Time slipped by in precise, polished months. The company thrived under my name. Investors quoted my articles. Magazines photographed me in offices of glass and steel. They called me the comeback of the decade. None of them knew that every contract I signed, every strategic smile I offered, was carved from the ghost of that dinner table. 2 winters after the trial, the estate came up for auction. No one bid at first. The locals whispered about curses and family tragedies. I bought it under a holding company, quietly, with the money Daniel had once tried to steal. I walked through the house the next morning. The air smelled the same: cedar, dust, and unresolved memory. My footsteps echoed against bare floors, stripped of furniture. I ran my hand along the banister and said, "Mine again." Not proudly, just factually. I didn't restore the house, I transformed it. The ballroom became a library, the guest rooms, offices. Downstairs, I kept one relic untouched: my father's study. His chair, his desk, the empty drawer that had once hidden the USB drive. Sometimes, when the wind moved through the chimney, it sounded like a sigh. That winter, the newspapers announced Daniel's parole. 5 years cut to 3 for good behavior. I didn't flinch. People asked if I would see him, if I'd forgive him. Forgiveness is for equals. We were no longer that. The day he walked free, snow fell again. Thick, deliberate flakes, like punctuation marks ending a story. I knew where he would go first: our mother's cottage by the coast. I sent flowers the day before. White lilies. No note. I kept working. While others toasted at office parties, I stayed late, finishing a report titled Legacy and Control. It wasn't corporate policy. It was autobiography disguised as research.
Every line about governance, every paragraph about accountability was another mirror reflecting what he'd taught me through betrayal. Sometimes he saw when he thought of me now. A sister? A ruin? A reminder that the world he tried to control now belonged entirely to someone who no longer needed him? The question didn't keep me awake. Nothing did, anymore.
It was early December when I visited the house again. My driver waited at the gate while I walked alone up the path. The lights glowed faintly through the snow, motion sensors catching movement like breath. Inside, the silence was perfect. I poured myself a glass of scotch from the decanter Dad once used. The amber liquid caught the firelight, a small, controlled blaze inside crystal. I thought of Daniel, somewhere out there, maybe staring at the same sky, realizing that everything he'd tried to own now thrived without him. That was punishment enough. No need for confrontation, no final speech. Some stories end not with screams, but with absence. I stood at the window. Outside, the garden was buried under snow, the same place where we used to build forts as children, before ambition divided us. For the first time in years, the cold didn't sting. It felt like belonging. I finished the drink, locked the door behind me, and left the house glowing quietly in the dark. It was mine again. Entirely, silently, eternally. Power doesn't roar. It settles. I learned that in the months after buying the house back. Reporters kept asking for a statement, waiting for a headline that would fit neatly under the photograph of a fallen brother and a resilient sister. I gave them none. Silence is the best press release. It leaves room for imagination. Mom passed away quietly that spring. Her last words to me were, "Promise me you'll live, not just win." I promised, though victory had already replaced living as my only language. At her funeral, I stood beside Daniel. He didn't speak to me. His face had collapsed inward, thinner, grayer. Prison had polished him down to bone. When the priest asked if anyone wished to share a memory, he glanced at me once, then lowered his head. That was the only conversation we ever had again. After the funeral, I returned to the house and began a reconstruction, not of walls, but of memory. Every photograph I could find, every document, every fragment of our father's handwriting, I cataloged and stored in a glass-walled archive on the second floor. Visitors called it the Reed Collection. I called it proof that truth, when protected long enough, becomes architecture. People came from universities to study corporate legacy ethics. They saw philanthropy. I saw penance. Each award plaque on my office wall carried an invisible footnote, built from betrayal. The world believed I'd moved on. In a way I had, but moving on isn't forgetting, it's carrying the weight better. One late autumn afternoon, a guard at reception buzzed me. "Miss Reed, there's a man asking for you. Says he's family." I didn't need a name. I told security to let him in. He entered the lobby slowly, shoulders hunched under a worn coat. The years had finished sculpting him into a stranger. He stopped, 10 feet away, and waited for permission to approach. I gave none. "Nice place," he said quietly. His voice still carried the rhythm of command, but none of its conviction. I didn't answer. He looked around, searching for some trace of the boy he used to be, maybe the sister who once laughed at his jokes. He found only marble, glass, and the reflection of a woman who owed him nothing. After a long silence, he nodded, half bowed, and left. That was our ending. A door closing behind his footsteps, the echo absorbed by success.
Years later, journalists wrote books about the Reed case. They called it a cautionary tale of greed and redemption. But that's not the truth. There was no redemption, only reclamation. The house stands now as headquarters of my foundation. Children learn ethics in the ballroom where Daniel once declared ownership. Scholars debate morality under the chandelier that witnessed our collapse. I walk those halls sometimes at night. The wood no longer creaks in protest. Even ghosts, it seems, know when to surrender. I keep one photograph on my desk. Dad, Mom, Daniel, and me on the front steps, years before the fracture. The image is sun-bleached, almost erased, and that feels right. Love fades, evidence endures. Tonight, snow falls again, heavy and soundless, the same kind that blanketed that first Christmas. From my window, the city glows beneath it, endless, obedient. I think of everything that has changed and everything that never will. Daniel exists somewhere beyond these walls, but he no longer matters. The world has swallowed him, and I don't need to know where he sleeps. I already own every memory he tried to steal. I pour a final drink, raise the glass to no one, and whisper, "Pack your bags, Daniel. The past isn't yours anymore." The fire answers with a low hiss, like applause that knows when to stop. Power taken through deceit dies with exposure. Power reclaimed through truth never dies. It simply grows quieter, colder, and absolute.